Looks like we're live. Well,
Great.
Thank you everyone that's been waiting. Thank you for joining. We're joined today by James Robbins. I'll let him introduce himself. I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Jaren Dorman, and I'm the design community manager at Gravity Sketch. And I basically connect with all of you out there, help make training content, answer your questions, point you in the right place, and just listen to what all of you are saying. It's an honor to interact with all of you and talk to awesome designers like James. James, you want to just introduce yourself for people that don't know who you are?
Sure. James Robbins. I'm a senior designer, digital modeler, and visualization expert in the auto industry right now. Been using Gravity Sketch for over 4 years, and I'd really like to thank Jaren for having me on here to participate in this session. It's going to be a really good time. I'll show you some of my tips and tricks, and we'll go over a lot of cool things.
Yeah, just for a little context, I reached out to James just not too long ago, and James for a long time has pretty much been a Gravity Sketch user ever since the very beginning. Would you say that's accurate? Pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah,
pretty long. Yeah, pretty long time.
Yeah, and so just he has some excellent workflows. Obviously, an experienced automotive designer, but then translating that into pretty efficient and powerful workflows in Gravity Sketch. And today's session is really focused on that and just looking at how you out there in the community you can approach car design, and it probably can be even applied to a lot of other things as well, not just cars. I think a lot of these workflows are just really good ways of looking at how to use Gravity Sketch and wield the tools. So we're going to be joining in co-creation. Just a few things I'll say is if any of you have any questions for James or for myself, we'll be happy to answer those questions. So if you just want to write it out in the chat, I'll be monitoring that periodically throughout. I'll be throwing some questions over to James, and he can answer your questions. But yeah, we're just going to kind of dive in. If you want to see some of James's work as well, I'll also say, go check him out on Instagram. We'll have links to his stuff in the description of the video. But yeah, without further ado, I guess let's jump right in and have a look at some stuff and see what we get into.
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer the video here. Awesome. So we're in co-creation right now.
You guys can. Yep.
Yeah. Let me see.
You can still hear me, right? Cool.
Let me just double check your audio's coming through. Can you say something again? Okay. Yeah. Looks
Yep.
good.
Looks good. Cool.
Yeah. So we're in co-creation right now, and James has brought in this wireframe vehicle. James, I'll just throw it over to you. If you want to sort of dive in, and we can just go from there, and I'm sure we'll start talking about a few things. But yeah, what was the process for designing this vehicle?
So this kind of just started out as a really rough sketch. Obviously, what you're seeing in front of you is pretty refined. I spent quite a few hours just getting the line work to be nice, and that's my eventual goal with a lot of the sketches that I do, is to get really clean line work to help guide the surface creation. But I think, obviously sports cars are great. They're really fun to draw. You can get a lot of fun proportions and different things going on with them. This is like a little mini mid-engine roadster type thing. And I think, we had talked the other day about, vehicle proportions and that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of the why I use Gravity Sketch, is because I'm able to kind of rough in sketches, but then easy manipulate just the curves alone to kind of tune in the volumes of the vehicle without getting into surfacing. And recently there's the multi-edit functionality, where you're able to grab multiple curves and move the points at once. That's really helped my workflow, especially, when you're looking at something like the cabin. You've got your cant rail here, right, where you have lines kind of coming together. Maybe they're kind of tapering at the bottom of the A pillar and then kind of getting thicker at the top, or vice versa. but it's really nice to be able to kind of, actually, let me ungroup this. So I can grab multiple curves at one time. You do a long hold to pull up the multi-edit, and then you can start pushing and pulling, kind of where the header might drop, and start just really kind of refining, the rail all together at one point, instead of having to draw one curve at a time versus, and then delete the one that you had there because it doesn't match, and then you can start manipulating everything at the same time. I think that's really powerful to kind of get sort of the volumes in place, when you're starting out. The other thing, yeah, go ahead.
Do you use dot select when you do that as well?
Yeah, I was just about to mention that the one place I really like to use that is in the front corner. Kind of when you're looking at it from front 3/4 view, like I'm this direction here, it's also important to look at it in cross view. So when you're looking, what does this corner do on the other side of the vehicle when you're kind of looking at it cross car? So that's where the soft selection is really nice, because you can do a long hold, and then I'll pull up the soft selection, right? The secondary sphere inside the grip sphere, and you're able to kind of grab maybe like the top, kind of underneath the headlight, but like just under here, and then start pulling that out. Oh, actually, it's not symmetried over there. I'll do it from this side, but it's nice to get that look in cross car. I mean, you can really torture things, but it's good to fill in the volume of how your kind of profile might look, when you're doing that across the vehicle there. So that's mainly the big thing with getting a nice car or nice line work in a vehicle, is just so you can lay everything out and see the proportions before you even get into surfacing. It takes a lot of time to get good surfacing in, but you can get really far with just the line work here.
So let me ask you, I know people will be wondering this and have questions, but to get to a refined wireframe like this, are there any rougher sketches, or even do you use reference images, or are there any rough wireframes you do first, or do you just jump right into drawing in the final line and just massage it until it looks the way you want it to look?
Yeah, it really depends on the project. A lot of the stuff I do personally, I just jump into 3D and start drawing lines. But if I'm doing it for work or something, I'm usually given a sketch to work from. Maybe we'll have a side view, or even package data, right? We'll be given the seating position and maybe even a side glass or something. So those kind of set a lot of the hard points. You'll have bumper beams and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But usually I'll start working from a side view sketch. So like I've done in some of my other videos, I'll just actually, you guys have the new wheel or the car base tool, which is really nice.
Yeah.
But in some of my other videos, I'll just start with a cylinder and then kind of measure out what I think the wheelbase would be. And sometimes it's just based off of a side view sketch. So you have your wheelbase and then you can pull that out, to figure out the width there. And then, yeah, usually I think I saw Emil doing it before. It's the same thing. Just, you can start drawing, in side view.
Yeah.
Is the red coming through? Let me change the color. It might be.
Yeah, but you can see it, but
I'll just
yeah.
make that a thick. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll just draw thicker lines. So if you had your vehicle here, actually, let me actually do it so it's a little more realistic. Right, you can just start drawing out your car in side view.
Right.
Even in side view, using that multi-select tool or the multi-edit,
Yeah.
you can just start pushing things around, whatever. Maybe you're doing a sedan or something, and really just roughen the shape. And then I start pulling those out in space, right, to the width of the vehicle. This is obviously very rough, but that's at least a starting point to get you in the right area.
Yeah, that's a good.
And like I said, a lot of the times the dimensions might be given to you, so you might already start out with a wheelbase where I'll just import the geometry. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, was getting that wheelbase locked down. What sort of your approaches were for that? So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah, it's all different depending on the project, but those are the first steps that you take, are getting the wheelbase in, because that sets kind of the base of the vehicle, where everything is going to go around it. Yep.
And so when it gets into surfacing, because you said you really like to define, because I can see you really are defining a lot of the surfacing with the wireframe as far as how it behaves
Mhm.
all along the vehicle. Is that so that your surfacing is like it's kind of the final look. It's like you know exactly what you're doing geometry wise. You know exactly how it's going to transition and all of that. What's that
Yeah. I think, I mean,
surface?
yeah, sometimes it's kind of an unknown, and that's where the curves really help kind of define some of the character, or like the character lines of or even if it's a theoretical line, like maybe around this area here, maybe this is going to be a round section here, but at least this will tell me where to build a theoretical to. And then depending if you go into alias or if you're just going to do this in sub D, then you can put a loop on either side to kind of get that round to come through here, that sort of thing. But I also like to, like the body side here really doesn't have anything, but that it's kind of the similar thing I was just saying about a theoretical. I like to draw kind of sections, like on where I think that what the surface might do.
Yeah.
Especially like here, there's maybe some sort of rocker detail.
Yeah.
So those are really just guides, especially in big spanned areas where you're not sure exactly what the volume will be, but it's at least a starting point. And I think the character lines just help you when you get into the surfacing. I'll just start doing do a surface here.
Do you sometimes just take a wireframe right into alias? Do you and just not even touch surfaces in Gravity Sketch? Is that a workflow that you ever use, or do you try at least do some sort of thing in GS that is helpful?
Yeah, I think recently, because now all the subdivision modeling tools are in here, I can get really far with it just in Gravity Sketch, probably 80% of the way there. And then just when you're kind of tuning up surfacing or some surface highlights, and maybe there's like a weird, like the wheel arch isn't perfectly I guess vertical here, like the top line I can see is a little bit proud. Like I'll just build that here, but then in Modo or Alias or one other sub modeling program, I'll kind of tune those surfaces up just so they're a little more in line. Like the wheel arches, they always tuck under. You might be able to see it here, like they're never vertical, right? So
Right.
stuff like that, kind of really tuning some of the line work is done after the fact, but the volume is there and the surfaces are there. And because the way subdivision modeling works, everything's connected, so you can just kind of push and pull it. So it's pretty nice. I'm just gonna.
Seeing that the host volume is pretty low, I'm just making sure that people can hear me.
Okay.
You just make sure that that's coming through. I'm just bumping it up even more. Let me know, everyone,
Okay.
if that's a little bit better. Let me just switch over here. Okay. Check the filters. I'm just going to turn off all these different filters. Maybe it's coming in. It's probably coming in a lot louder now, actually. Okay. Probably turn that down just a little bit. Looks like it's coming in a lot louder. Anyway, sorry for that, everyone. But, well, at least you could hear James, which is really probably the more important part. So, yeah, so, yeah, I was going to ask, like, is there an area of the vehicle that you typically start with when you get into surfacing, or is it kind of just anywhere that seems to make the most sense depending on the design? Or is there?
Yeah, actually, I think personally for me, it's usually the wheel arches themselves.
Okay.
Ultimately, because I'll just use a different color here. Usually, if you're talking about subdivision modeling, that's where when I'm approaching the wheel arches first, you'll have your topology flow of your polygons that are coming in from every direction.
Right.
Let me use a different.
This is actually an area that I would like some clarity on myself as well, because I've been working on some vehicles. How do you deal with those transitions going from the side panel to wheel arch? Just
Yeah, and that's usually why I start with them, is because you
Yeah.
have to kind of bring everything together.
Yeah.
The body side is usually pretty easy because they can come straight through
Yeah.
your wheel arch like this.
Yeah.
It's usually going to be somewhere here on the front and the rear. This is a bit different because I have this vent here, so it wouldn't really happen here. But yeah, for like this one, let me just get rid of these. So say I'll just do it quickly here. Actually, we'll do that. We'll do.
Because if you don't quite do it right, I've
This
noticed you
guy.
can get some weird artifacts.
Yeah, and that's a tricky part too, is because the wheel arch, you'll notice it right away if it doesn't look correct.
Yeah.
Oops. Sorry, I always forget that this adds a third row over here.
Oh yeah, with the
So this is now subd. So you can see it's going to be a little bit off. The shape of it itself. So that's why I like to make the curves nice and clean, so I can kind of pull those edges right to it, just for a visual reference when I'm building it. And then you can see how when it's in its cage mode, it's off, right? So it doesn't quite fit those two curves. But what you're really looking for is to make sure it fits when it's in smooth mode.
Right.
And from here, this is why I start with the wheel arch itself, because then I can just pull out from it to that next character line. So you're not really fighting the topology as it comes down the door and then realizing I don't have a polygon in this area, right? So this is a starting point. Obviously, as you get to get more into the modeling itself, you're gonna end up adding more loops.
Yeah, how do you deal with that? Because I've noticed
somewhere through here
when I've done models myself, if I need more geometry here, say for like a crease, how do you deal with that down the line when it intersects with your wheel arch? Do you have to just kind of spread it out and kind of hide it, or is there a way that you do that?
Yeah, pretty much. And those are some of the things that I'll fine tune after the fact, because it's a little difficult to keep a perfectly round thing when you're adding loop through it. It'll start to actually, if you can look right here, right, you'll start to flatten out as you add loops.
Right.
So this is a lot through here. I wouldn't say this would be good to do, but it's mainly just once you get the loop in there, you're kind of pulling it back or pulling it up and down just to kind of keep that curve there. So it's really manual at that point. You're just kind of adding polygons where you need them. But like this is an area where we were talking about, you'll have multiple things coming together. And that's why I kind of like to start building off of this, because then I can just kind of come up here, add another loop. Right, and then close that off. And now things will flow pretty well up through here. Obviously, you might want to crease your wheel arch or add a loop on either side just to get it to look, nice and crisp. But yeah, these are typically the areas that you'll spend a lot of time with, and it's really all going to depend on what the geometry wants to do around it or what the character lines are doing. Because if you had a hard line that came here, this condition wouldn't really work.
Right.
Right, because you need to fade out or something, or come into the wheel arch. So it's just a bit of trial and error and experience doing it.
I've noticed
really
it does take some time to work out. Yeah. It does take some time to work out, but it's so nice once you have it dialed in, especially when you add those creases. It's like, it all flows really nicely. It's really satisfying.
Yeah, and actually, I think I have a surface. Yeah, okay, I did.
Oh, nice.
Oops. Yeah, just so we don't have to sit here and fight something live. It's like having the cake already baked, right? Yeah, so you can see here, I kind of wanted a bigger core, not a crease line through here.
Yeah.
Right, and then that kind of blends out and it comes down this way. Oh, let me turn on. Can you see the cross sections or the surface contours?
Yeah, we can see the points when you go into edit mode.
Oh, when you edit, okay, gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, you can see here how this just kind of comes and then blends out through here, and same with this, right? Because if you look at the the rocker here, this has a different kind of trajectory, or this rocker light catcher area.
Right.
Right, it's moving kind of horizontal, or not horizontal, diagonal, but this is a little more horizontal. So then you'll start to get areas like this where your points kind of have to deviate from each other, and then they kind of come together as they come towards the rear, just to get that area, just to get that section to look good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can see I try and keep as little points as possible, which is going to be the trick really, because the more loops you add in certain areas, the more you're going to be fighting, as far as your vertice count and loops go.
Right.
So, yeah.
And
it's
so
big fun project.
Yeah. No, this is cool. I love it. Are you seeing this dimple, this big, right here?
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay. I just
Probably because I was just
I was making sure.
Yeah, and that's why. I have a reflective shader on too, so you can see with just those points, you can start to kind of get the surfacing, kind of in place. This is also one of those things where obviously it's going to come down to your arm, I guess, fidelity, the movements you can make in VR, holding your hand in space,
right,
to kind of really tune those points. So this is where I might, after the fact, come in and really kind of move those points. I mean, it's by millimeters really, just to get the reflections to look perfect.
Do you ever
but once all the volumes are there, it's easy to do. So.
Yeah. Do you ever use the smooth tool? Is that ever helpful to you, or is it mainly just by hand, or?
Yeah, no, I do definitely use it. Usually, and this might not be a good example on this car, but like up here, this is also another area where, just like here, you have multiple directions of edge flow coming together. Figuring out a corner on a vehicle is always a tricky part. So I use the smooth tool in this area, I would say. Yeah, and sometimes here too. It all depends what the surface is really doing.
Yeah.
But.
And do you find I've seen some different things on this in the community, because we added a crease function to the sub-D menu to make creases. But I've seen some people say we like using the crease because it makes a nice sharp knife edge without adding extra geometry. But some people want a little bit of that sort of that round on the crease, for rendering. And so the traditional way is to add more geometry for a crease. Right. Do you find yourself typically just adding more geometry, going a more traditional route, or do you mess around with the crease?
I always try and use the crease tool as much as I can when I'm still kind of moving things around, because it's less points to kind of keep track of. If you're trying to move an entire edge loop and you've got 2 loops on either side of it, and you miss a point or you miss one of the loops, then it's hard to keep track of that stuff. I think this model itself has probably got the beveled edges mostly. I don't think there's a lot of creases on it, but depending on the stage of the project or how, it's mainly for the rendering, you want the fillets and the nice kind of rounds and stuff like that. But when you're in the early stages of the design, it's really nice to just keep it creased. That way you can see the kind of the character lines a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm just demonstrating for everyone, just if you don't know. Basically, you can add creases to edges. And essentially I have, if I'm in edit mode, so right now I'm in edit mode for sub-D, I just go over here to the crease tool and touch the edges that I would like to crease. And you'll see it in a sec once I exit edit mode. And then there's now a crease on this on the side of the vehicle, and it's even more pronounced when you pull it out. But I like what you said there on using the crease just as a intermediate step, instead of adding all that geometry and having to wrangle that down the line. You can just see your crease and see how it would look on the vehicle before actually committing to it, which is really it's nice. Uncrease.
Yeah, so I mean that's probably most projects I'll leave the creases in as long as I can, just to kind of manage the topology. But yeah, once you start to export it and you start doing visualization stuff, some of that stuff is really nice to have. Exactly.
Yeah, I can turn on surface contour for that as well. Let's see. Somebody was asking to turn on so we can see it. Just for me, it's probably on for you, but it doesn't display for.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering because I had it on for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that's a nice way to see what the geometry is doing. So what do you do typically then? I know I've seen some different workflows that you've done. So when you have a vehicle like this, obviously you've mentioned that you use Moto and Alias. Do you sometimes just take like a model like this and do like a 2D rendering over top or more sketching? Do you find yourself going back and forth in the design process, or is that again just depending on the project?
Yeah, it does depend on the project. A lot of the stuff that I do for myself, I think of it more as like a sketch model, and I'm pretty much just working completely in Gravity Sketch, and then I get it to a point where I'm like, oh, okay, I want to render that, and then I'll do a render, and it's like I'll revisit the project at some point later in the future, like everything, nothing's ever done. But from a designer's perspective, if all they need are the lines to kind of give a modeler or a surface designer input, then you don't even need to do any of the surfacing, right? You can just spend your time and get a really nice wireframe and maybe draw in some sections and stuff like that. And then that's even still good for you because you can do like the block out, right, where you just fill in a volume and then export the screenshot to Photoshop. I've seen that workflow a lot. I don't typically do that just because most of the stuff I do is on the digital, the surface design side, so making the data itself. But yeah, I mean, that's a totally relevant workflow as well. If you don't want to spend the time to learn, subdivision modeling and stuff like that, or you don't need the final render itself. Yeah.
Awesome. And so what are I would like to know what some of the difficult areas are for you, like doing some sub-D in Gravity Sketch. Have there been areas that you kind of wish maybe like you could have a little more control on, or a little more influence to help get the design where you need it to be, so that when you eventually bring it to your other programs, you can work with it more easily?
Yeah, I think I was kind of referencing that with just the fine tuning. Obviously, it's going to come down to your own kind of muscle and hand coordination in a 3D space. Maybe if there's like a soft move, not a soft move, but like if I'm moving my hand, like, I don't know, 100 millimeters or something, like the point is only going to move, a millimeter. Maybe there's some sort of ratio you can kind of slow down the movement. That's one thought I've had about that. And that's really the biggest thing, is just really coming in and when you're trying to fine tune reflections and little points, because it's really sub-millimeter movements that can really change your reflection and really kind of get it to what you want. But maybe that is better suited to be done on a computer where you have a mouse and you can do it in a dead orthographic view or something like that. But I mean, for me, this gets me 80% of the way, 85% of the way. So
gotcha.
I usually don't have any issues with it. The biggest thing is when you're getting into subdivision modeling is understanding topology and edge flow and how you want your polygons to be laid out on the vehicle, right?
Right.
Because that's going to really determine what happens with the surface. And that's always the tricky part with learning sub, because it's so different from traditional alias curves and surfaces, and then you can trim and just blend and do that sort of thing. But the good thing about this is it's all one volume. So if you start, you can come in like I was doing with the curves here, but you can do the same thing with the soft selection, right? And move the volume of that bumper instead, right? Just a little bit. And you can see in the cross view it is moving.
Yeah.
Because let's have symmetry. So something like that, when you are getting into that side of it, it's nice because everything's connected. You don't have to really worry about breaking some other surface up at the top of the fender or by the headlight and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
That's the power of sub-D, really.
And that's the thing with it reminds me of another thing too, is like I see pretty much everything as a quad. I don't really see any triangles anywhere. Is that something you try and avoid, or try to go for, is solve your geometry with a quad. I even see like down here, it's even a quad where this crease comes to, where this crease terminates.
Yeah.
It's still a quad even right here.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that's a good thing to bring up, because this was probably a single edge at one point and kept as a hard crease.
Yeah.
But then getting it to blend out and kind of terminate before here, this is actually how you would do it. Right, I'll just turn on box mode here. But you can see, because it is a four-sided, it's going to terminate pretty well, or it'll blend out as it comes to here.
Right.
Whereas if you had just two edges, which is perfectly fine, you can have two edges if you wanted a bigger fillet there or a bigger radius, you know, but then it would be ending in a triangle, which isn't necessarily bad in itself. You know, a lot of people will say that you need quads everywhere, but as long as the reflection and the surface does what you want, it's fine.
Yeah.
At least in my book, right? You know, no one's ever going to see that, especially if you're just doing a render, right, and it doesn't look weird, then that's fine. Even milling a car out, right? Because I've milled out subdivision data before in a full-size clay model and hard model, and it doesn't show up, right?
Right. It just at the end of the day,
mill marks and sand it.
That makes sense. At the end of the day, if it looks the way it's supposed to.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, this has been really insightful already, I think, just on getting really into Sub D and how to approach it. I want to ask, I guess I maybe want to rewind just a little bit on the design process for you. So, I mean, obviously you have a lot of experience, so you're probably working on a lot of muscle memory of just knowing how you want to proportion a vehicle, and just how everything sort of sits and lays out. I'm assuming that when you're making, let's say, like a model like this, you're just putting the lights there because you know that's where they would sit. Like, you just know that it would work, and that's what looks good. What would you say to someone that maybe doesn't have as much car design experience but wants to get into sort of maybe a higher level of car design and really nailing in those proportions? Maybe like the initial idea phase, I guess, just getting things to look right, because I know it can be really difficult to do for vehicles, to make it look right.
Yeah, and a lot of that does come with, you know, experience and understanding aesthetic design, right, with a vehicle, and understanding, you know, you have the overall vehicle proportions, but then you have graphic proportions as well on a vehicle, right? The DLO, right? The cabin, the daylight open, the glass.
Yeah.
You know, even on the front end here, right? The size of a grille related to the size of the side, maybe intake or whatever, versus the headlight.
Yeah.
So yeah, for that, I mean, look at cars, right? Look at current cars that look good. I mean, don't copy them obviously, but look at the relationship of the size of one element versus another, and really just study them, and that's the starting point, really. And then over time, as you do it more and more, and obviously being in design studio and getting feedback from other people really helps you understand that a lot more. But yeah, it's really just spending the time with it, right? You got to put the hours in, and understand the aesthetic appeal of some things. Like this, actually, this I think was like the third iteration of this sketch. I'm gonna hide this stuff here. Like, this was a completely different front end.
Gotcha. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, but it's the same vehicle, right? So it's experimenting, right, with, and this was all just done in curves. Yeah. Actually, now I look back at this, I think this is actually better than the other one that I went with. But that's also the thing too. Put something away for a little while, come back to it, and see if you still like it.
Right.
You know, that's something people need to do as well. But yeah, use the curves, right? Don't worry about the surfacing, you know, while you're still experimenting, and just play around with some of these things, like, and see what they look like. So it's really just, spending time with it and getting feedback from other designers and seeing what their thoughts are on it and why they think it looks better one way or the other. Don't be afraid to talk to other people about it. Definitely.
I kind of want to go into a little bit of car design 101 a little bit on sort of some how, sort of how designers break down the vehicle. Like, you kind of used a few words there already, which was the graphical elements versus the
the body surface. Could you just elaborate a little bit more what a graphical detail is or a graphical element is versus a car surface, and maybe even sort of these different design terms that are used in vehicle design to help break down the vehicle.
Right. So I think, the one way to differentiate graphic versus volume is what's the body color relationship, like how much body paint there is versus the cabin glass opening, right? Because in a vehicle from a side view, you'll look at, maybe the cabin is 1/3 of the entire volume from maybe ground line or rocker up. So the body is 2/3 of that proportion, right? So that would be your first big proportional breakup, from cabin to body side. And then front to rear, what's the front overhang, right? That distance from the wheel arch to the front of the vehicle. What is that relationship to the rest of the car? And same with the rear. Typically 2D sketches are really short overhangs, but in reality, there's a bumper beam and a radiator and all sorts of stuff there.
Yeah.
You're going to see a different relationship once you get into 3D and you start getting those elements in there. And then that also lends to it too, like how long you want the hood to feel, right? This has a very, very forward cabin, from a center line here, right? It's almost lands in the middle of the wheel. It's not necessarily realistic, maybe for this vehicle, it's not correct. But it does add some sort of visual difference compared to another vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, the length of the hood will determine the front overhang and how long or short you want that to feel.
Yeah.
So it's really, playing with kind of those elements and where they land. From a side view, let me pull up from a side view, right, your A pillar here. Ooh, I don't know if I can draw on that layer.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you could explain those to people too, like A pillar, B pillar, all that kind of thing. So these different terms that are used in car design.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, I don't think I can draw right now. My pen stop. Let's see. Give me 1 second. It won't let me draw on this layer. It's the.
And we've got a couple of questions too. I can ask you here in a minute as well.
Yeah. Why don't you do that while I figure out why I can't draw?
Yeah. No. You're all good. No worries. No worries,
Yeah.
James. From Frank Yu, we've got, he said, "Hi Robbins, will you take your gravity sketch model into Alias and rebuild it for better surface continuity?" And I think we maybe touched on that a little bit earlier, but.
Yeah, eventually, probably. For me, my personal stuff, I don't really want to spend the time doing that, just because what I can get out of the sub-D is good enough for what I need. But yeah, if you're working in a studio, and you output a sub-D model as a designer, and you might be working with an Alias modeler or someone like myself, you will spend time to kind of refine and build nice, maybe Class A or mock-up level data, so you can make a really nice hard model, and you'll spend more time refining, getting the perfect curvature across, your cabin section or your body side and stuff like that. So yeah, that's something that is definitely doable, and at least it's better for the modeler that way too, because they'll at least have something to reference as far as the volumes. It's there's always a back and forth between the designer and the modeler, the surfacer, and it's the same thing with clay, right? You're building somebody else's design, and you might interpret differently. So the more 3D data or 3D reference you can give somebody, I think the better. So that's definitely a good workflow. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. For that clarification. And we have another question as well from Nathan. Nathan Cook says, "Do you intentionally experiment in personal work, try out odd forms, break program? Generally, what is the balance between personal informing professional and vice versa?" So I think for me, for me, I've always, I went to design school as well, but I've definitely leaned more towards the 3D side of it. I was always building 3D models even in school. The drawing is great, it's for visual communication to other designers.
But for me, I was just like, I want to build a 3D model. So for personal work, yeah, a lot of it is just experimentation. You know, that's why I got into Gravity Sketch actually, is because it's like, hey, is there a different way to build digital models? And is there a quicker way as well? So yeah, a lot of my personal work is just me having fun and doing things that I like to do. You know, in the studio, you'll be put on a project, right? You're making an SUV or a minivan or maybe a sports car or a race car or something, you know, and you'll be influenced. If you're the designer on the project, you're going to influence the output. But in my situation, I was the digital modeler, so I'm being given a design to create, and referencing their sketches or their input or somebody else's reference or input. So yeah, awesome. Personal stuff is fun, but there's a professional side to it as well. And I think they both ultimately do influence each other.
Yeah. And you do a lot of personal stuff from what we've seen.
Yeah.
So it really contributes to keeping that creative flow going, I think, in the whole process.
Right, absolutely.
Let's see. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions, anyone watching, if you have any questions for James, feel free to ask. But yeah, so back to these like A pillar, B pillar, like if you could just break that down really quick, what that is, what that means in a vehicle.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll just start with the cabin actually. So yeah, obviously A pillar, B pillar, C pillar, and then D pillar.
Yeah.
They start at the front. You know, the A pillar is the first one. It's where it touches down somewhere by the door and fender here.
Yeah.
B pillar will be if you're on a, you know, if you have, well, on this car, it's a sports car, will be back here, but it's usually on a passenger vehicle, it would be the end of the front door and the start of either a second door, or it would just end here. And then the next one would be a C pillar, right? That's actually, so this is actually a C pillar as well on this, right? Because it's the next one and that's where it's ending.
Yeah.
But say you had a 3-row SUV, you'd probably have another window, and then the next pillar would be the D pillar, and that would end at the back of the vehicle there.
Gotcha.
And then I was saying like DLO before, that's daylight opening. So that's your actual glass openings, right? So on your body side, your front windshield for your window, you know, that sort of thing. So
right.
that really just references the graphic of the glass itself is the daylight opening. So that's the cabin. This is actually, and this rail itself, different companies might call it other things, or they'll have a name for the different lines and stuff like that. But this is, you could probably get away with just calling it the cant rail. And that's the whole rail that goes from the A pillar up over the roof and down to the C or D pillar. Yeah.
Could you talk about the, I think this is an industry term, but the bloodline, is that the term, or is that maybe not an official term of a vehicle?
Yeah, I guess that depends. Yeah, I guess that depends what you're talking about. Like, so you can call this the belt line, which would be on the bottom of the window that defines the bottom of the glass. But then you also have a body side character line. I don't know if that's what you might be referring to either. But yeah. I mean, Honda has their names for it, and then other companies. I mean, this is just, I think a belt line is a pretty standard term for this one.
Yeah.
And then the character line is just body side character line, and then down on the bottom you'll have your rocker line. That'll probably be the lowermost line, and then this area above it, if you have some sort of scallop or shape here, that would just be called a light catcher or rocker light catcher or something like that.
Right. Okay. I just I wanted to break those down because I know there's some terms and could be interesting, and if there's anybody that wants to be a car designer watching, it could be interesting for them as well. But yeah, it's cool. And then these are like the wheel arches, right? Basically, this is pretty self-explanatory. But
and actually, I mean, the interesting about wheel arches too is I see it in a lot of young designers. Wheel arches are not round.
Right.
They look round because they're against, you obviously have a wheel in there, so it's going to look round, and it is mostly round, but usually at the tops of the corner, or I guess they're not the tops, but the almost top, we'll call it on the right and left side here, it is actually a little more square. This is obviously an exaggeration.
Right.
That's usually to help with clearance when the tire is at full full rebound or full load and stuff like that. And then down at the bottom, they will usually straighten out. They won't be dead straight, and this will vary depending on the vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't tuck in. A lot of times people draw that around the wheel. It looks great in a sketch, right? Because you're really filling that wheel arch, but
Yeah.
it's always something to keep in mind that there is a lot of form to these themselves. You know, even in front and rear view, they do tuck under. Right.
Yeah.
They're not flat.
Yeah.
So when you're developing a car, you know, that's going to give you your stance too, right? Because your tire in section is going to poke out.
Right.
You know, if you had camber, obviously it's going to do more, but that's one way to kind of get a nice stance on the vehicle, is to tuck these under, and that'll kind of carry through in the rocker as well. Obviously, it's going to depend on what character line you have here, but there's definitely a lot of movement coming under the vehicle in this section here. So something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There really is a lot of dimension to them, isn't there? I mean, like
Yeah.
just like the rest of the vehicle, there's not really. I mean, I guess depending on the style, I mean, I guess you can have pretty straight lines, but I guess again that just depends on the aesthetic. But what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, like the Cybertruck is very flat, but yeah. Anyway, that's a whole nother story.
No, yeah. Well, hey, what are your thoughts on the Cybertruck? There's definitely some very polarizing thoughts from the design community. What are your honest thoughts from it? I'd love to know.
I'm not a huge fan, to be honest. I think it's definitely new and interesting.
Yeah.
But I think getting back to that whole nothing's flat comment, you know, you need some sweetness to some surfacing, right? You know, it's cool, it's polarizing, it gets people's attention, but I'm personally not a huge fan of it. But that's just me.
That's what that's what I've heard a lot from, you know, especially designers in the industry that, you know, style things for a living. It's sort of anti-style in a way, or anti-styling, because of these flat, you know, panel sort of polygonal form that it is.
Which from a form language standpoint, it's new and interesting, and that, you know, maybe that's why it went that direction, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But who knows? Yeah, who knows?
I mean, it's just so striking
cars
because
like that.
What's that?
I said maybe there will be more cars like that, right? You know, you need something like that too to kind of start a new trend and stuff like that. So, you know, maybe somebody will make a different version or something. Yeah.
That's why I think it's pretty interesting, just because of that aspect, because it's so different. It's like, it might even be a turning point for a new aesthetic, especially if it catches on. Like, you know, once they start rolling out, and if a bunch of people start buying them, it could really. Could you see that, like, informing other car manufacturers' design influence, maybe following suit with Tesla in that way? Do companies do that? Do they?
Well, I guess it depends on the brand's, you know, design language itself, right?
Yeah.
You know, every company wants to, you know, have something identifiable to themselves. So obviously, if another company is already doing it, you want to kind of stray away from it. Right, or maybe there's some parts of it that might catch on to maybe a new car company that doesn't have an established language, something like that. But I think that's going to be the hardest thing is creating that brand identity. So maybe it'll influence people. I don't know. It depends, really.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
It's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, no, it's pretty multifaceted. It will be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I was actually wasn't even thinking about that, but when you brought it up, I was curious what your thoughts are, because I know that there's a lot of designers out there that have very strong opinions, you know, for it or against it, and it's really fun to see the dialogue around it.
Well, that's probably part of it too, is starting a conversation, right?
Yeah,
when people
absolutely.
are talking about it, it's good. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you could argue that's why it's successful in and of itself. It's got everybody talking.
Right.
And that's what you want, right? As a designer, or get people talking. I'm trying to do the bridge thing. It's not detecting.
I think maybe because is that the symmetry side, maybe?
Yeah, but I guess that shouldn't really. Oh, maybe. Oh, that's definitely why. Yeah. There you go. I just wanted to illustrate that. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. There's I've even seen some pretty funny stuff of people just like taking the Cybertruck and drawing like a child's drawing of it, and saying like, it looks like something my 6-year-old drew and just made it a vehicle. But then
Right.
and then other people are just like, it's revolutionary, and so like it's like totally, I mean, everything we just said, it's just totally going against everything that car design has been,
Right.
and just flipping it on its head. So yeah, interesting. But so I guess as we kind of come towards the end here, I would love to, something I ask a lot of our guests, especially ones with experience, is just like, is there any advice that you would give to like a young designer, a young car designer, maybe even just some creative advice or professional advice in general, whatever comes to mind, that you would like to give to any aspiring designer watching?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me was that I've ever heard is you have to put in the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. Whether it's sketching or modeling, right? In order to get better, you have to do it a lot. And like I mentioned before, don't be afraid to talk to your peers or people that can give you advice that are more senior or that have the experience, because they'll have, like myself, I've worked on a lot of projects. I've built a lot of cars. So don't be afraid to just reach out and get their input or feedback on something you're working on, because they might have some insights, into why something doesn't look right or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I guess I'll put my.
I think those are pretty common.
Oh yeah.
Common inputs, but yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, that's really, really good. And I think I'll add to that and say too, just from personal experience, like especially when I was a student, and that more often than not, if you reach out to a professional in the industry that you're interested in, more often than not, they're really open to giving you feedback and giving you thoughts on your work, or just giving you even just advice. And so don't be afraid to reach out to someone out there if there's someone you're thinking about or someone that comes to mind that you just really enjoy their work. I feel like in this day and age of social media, just like DMing people like seems to more often than not be actually pretty successful. Might get a response back, and you just never know. Go ahead,
exactly.
Get out there and interact with your peers in the community, and they're really. It seemed to me is that most designers, most artists are really, really open to conversation, which is cool.
Yeah.
So, well, I just want to thank you, James, for your time, and thank you for just diving into your techniques and how you approach things. I want to thank everybody for watching live. If you sort of came a little bit late, this is going to be available like immediately, so you can just go and rewind it and watch it from the beginning. And then if you want to follow any of James's work, we've got his website as well as his Instagram on the description as well. And just go check out his stuff. He's got some awesome work. And is there anybody anything you want to, let people know about? You want them to keep their eyes on, or if it's okay if there's nothing, but just want to give you a chance to do that.
Yeah. I wanted to first just thank you for having me on. I think we reached out a little while ago and we finally able to get this going.
Oh, yeah.
But I just wanted to thank the entire Gravity Sketch team themselves. I've been involved for a really long time with this, and they're really willing to take input and put it into the product, which is great. You guys are doing an awesome job with everything. There's a lot of people in the community asking for the same thing, and new tools, new features, new functions. It'll get there. I have absolute faith that the team will do their best to get most of that stuff in there. So I think the biggest thing is just have patience. Good things come with time. So again, just thanks everybody for doing what you do. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to reach out. Jaren said my Instagram will be there. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you for the kind words. I know they're listening. So, yeah, thanks so much. One last thing I'll say, a little bit of a plug too. We got the iPad app as well. So we're trying to get more awareness around that. So if you have an iPad, go download Gravity Sketch iPad. It's free. Try it out. And we're adding new functions and getting feedback for that. So go try it out. But yeah, with that, thank you, James, and thank you everyone else for joining. And we will see you next time. See you now.
Great.